structuring your business at the start, what are the benefits between, let's say, an LLC versus a corporation versus what most people usually hear about S Corp being taxed and tax-free? Like most people typically try to lean towards that, but they don't know what all of those mean. So with short-term rentals and specifically Airbnb, would you say like an LLC, when should you lean towards an LLC versus a corporation?
Okay, so good question. First and foremost, I want to start off by saying that this is neither financial or legal advice, right? Because I'm not representing anyone. I don't want you guys to take this as advice. Just take this information, consider it, apply it to your particular needs, if your particular situation, and also do your research, right? Because I'm going to assume everyone's in different states, so different laws apply to different states. So take all that into consideration and everything with a grain of salt. With that being said, an LLC, an incorporation, and like, for example, a sole proprietorship, those kind of business structures, those give the state and federal government an idea about how you want to be taxed and how you are going to be, how your liabilities are going to be spread apart, right? So an LLC, for example, is a limited liability company. Typically, if it's not a single membership, if it's not a single member LLC, the government and the state where you've incorporated is assuming that you want to acquire some liability and separate yourself from the business as much as you can. An LLC that is not a single member LLC, the liability is spread between the number of members that are involved in the business. A corporation, on the other hand, is set up in a way where you are completely a different entity. So the LLC is not, it's tied to you via the EIN and you incorporating and all that other stuff. But if someone were to sue you, they're suing the corporation. Like you're not even possibly attached to it. Your assets, any funds that you have, whatever, they're not going to look at you. I know we spoke a little bit off the recording, and I'd like to mention, and I know you're going to ask, we're going to touch on it a little bit more, but there are special circumstances where that consideration could be removed from you, whether you have a corporation or LLC, but we'll speak on that later, a little bit more later. But for the most part, especially in the Airbnb business space, a corporation will offer you a lot more protection. Because I mentioned to Precious, Airbnb doesn't really have, they have $1 million worth of liability coverage, right? But they're not really clear about what exactly that means or what's covered. I'm sure if we contacted them or read through the terms, they'd give a little bit more detail, but it's a little obscure. So if you want to create as much protection for yourself and your personal assets, especially if you have other businesses or you have a home or other assets where someone can come after, in my personal opinion, an incorporation gives you the most protection. But an LLC is just as good, especially if you structure it the right way and you're using it properly.
Absolutely. Okay, makes sense. And then with that, would you say that, because I know you said that especially if you have other businesses, so let's say, I know that we have a few folks within the program, even on the call, that in addition to starting their Airbnb business, they're also looking to start other businesses or they already have other businesses in place. And some even mentioned in regards to that business credit too. But would you say that a registration, let's say that they're looking to get started with their Airbnb business in Georgia in addition to Florida, but maybe right now it's Georgia, but eventually they want to go to Florida, should a business registration be filed within every state that you're actually planning on doing that short-term rental?
Right. Yes, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is because you can have, like, let's say, for example, I wanted to take credit conversion and expand it into the state of Florida. And I would probably do that or incentivize to do that because there's a good Airbnb market there. I don't have to pay state taxes. So there are a lot of incentives to move, but it would require me as an owner to create a domestic LLC in that state. It gets really muddy and it gets really complicated because you have to think about what state, well, granted, Florida doesn't have state taxes, right? But what state are you being taxed against, right? And then Airbnb has, what do they call them? They have Airbnb occupancy taxes and remittances. So you have to consider those as well. So with all things considered, it's just ideal for you to go by each state that you want to have the rental businesses versus trying to create one company and then trying to have businesses in different states. If you were to get sued, God forbid, because that is a reality and a possibility,
Yeah.
which state laws are we abiding by? And if you do, I would personally recommend having a lawyer involved in that process in the formation of that LLC or that incorporation that will have different domestic LLCs, because you want to make sure that is done properly so you're not fined or penalized by the IRS or the state where you should be paying those transactions or where you're doing business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for those that are, or I see we might have a question. So would you say Shauna says, so would you say to get separate LLC versus a foreign LLC in those states?
To make it easier on you, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, would you say that the process of making an LLC foreign in another state, based on what you're saying, it sounds like it's just a little more strenuous or a longer process?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It is.
Got you. Now, for those that say that, hey, like I already have a business and maybe they, I don't know, started building business credit, they got their Quill account, Uline Granger, and they're like, I already have a business score populating, a credit score populating. Am I able to use that business credit score for my Airbnb business?
No. And I only say no because when you think about like the initial process of starting this business, when you registered your EIN, you have to declare what this business would be doing, right? So that's step number one. You've already declared what the business is doing. Then when you file your taxes, you're going to be assigned a NAICS code, and that NAICS code has to correspond with like your expenditures. It has to correspond with your creditors. Like, for example, if I don't, like people talk about gas cards, right? For example, which is a really big one. But if you don't have a card that's registered under the business or a business or a NAICS code that allows you to write off fuel as an expenditure, it gets a little bit tricky when you're trying to write these things off and you can get audited, right? So it would just be easier. And I kid you not when I say just easier to, if you have multiple businesses and you want to try to, instead of trying to leverage what you already have established, start a brand new business. Appropriately, start it correctly, make sure everything is attributed correctly, and you'll be fine. You just don't want to run the risk of being audited on a technicality, like trying to use your gas card for business A when it's really for business B.
Okay.
Yeah.
It makes total sense. I think that goes to or speaks to that fact of keeping like your own expenses and your business expenses separate, like all of those. But then even furthermore, if you got numerous businesses, keeping those separate too.
Absolutely.
And then I know you mentioned like a NAICS code. You mentioned this NAICS code, and for us here within the program, we use NAICS code 721199, which is pretty much all other travel accommodation. Now, the common question that we get is, and I want us to talk about this a little bit, right? Because some people ask me the question, and I try to speak on it. I don't know, maybe as eloquently as you can, but why should we not, number one, be choosing a NAICS code that's related to like real estate and rentals?
Because there's just two different industries.
It's two different industries.
Yeah, that's one thing. And another thing is like, for example, real estate, depending on the NAICS code for the real estate that you want to use, they have different deductions versus the NAICS code for like the 721199, right? So when I'm like, for example, if I were to do someone's taxes right now and I'm looking, or if I'm reconciling an account right now, I would look at, okay, this is what the person's industry is. This is the appropriate NAICS code to assign. And then I know automatically like, okay, this should be deducted. This should be deducted. If I'm counseling them or if they're consulting with me about like how to maximize or how to reduce their tax liability and maximize their profit, I'm going to say, hey, you need to spend more money in this area, or you need to stop spending money in this area, or this is how you would reduce your tax liability. But you can't do that if you have the wrong code, or if you're in the wrong industry. And then you open up yourself to auditing, which when I tell you on my life, you do not want to deal with the IRS. So just at all.
You've told me numerous times, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything you can do to avoid them.
And then what is this piece in regards to like real estate just being like what's considered a high risk industry? How often do you see that in terms of the credit end of things?
Maybe narrow down on that question a little bit more for me, because that could go a lot of different ways.
Because usually what I hear is that, you know, we use a specific NAICS code outside of real estate because real estate is considered what is called like a high risk industry, similar to lottery, similar to casinos, et cetera, et cetera. So based on that, what I've been told is that also choosing that NAICS code that's outside of rental and real estate helps because it will help so that you're not getting denied for certain applications you're submitting with that business.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I understand now. So that rhetoric or the narrative about real estate being high risk is mostly related to funding, right? So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but one thing is that you might see a lot of construction happening around you and then the project just stops. Like that happens a lot. So a lot of people, a lot of banks consider that high risk because of the fact that there's so many factors and elements that go into completing a project. So that's one reason why a bank might look at you as high risk, or it could also be high risk depending on what kind of real estate you're getting into. Investing is not necessarily super high risk, but things like new constructions, what else? That's a good question. New constructions are definitely one. Buildings are definitely another one, right? Like we heard about that building that felt like just deteriorated in Miami. Like that's a big risk, especially if they were still financing it. So those kind of things, the risk piece is mostly associated to like capital. If you're ever trying to
getting capital. And just for context for you as well, most folks on the call are getting started with corporate leasing and they're looking to, at the very least, get some funding to get started, assist with them getting started. So that's why I asked that question. Anna asked as well, are you able to get a NAICS code change? So I think this is speaking for those who may already have an LLC in place, right? And let's talk about that a little bit too, because I get a number of folks who come to me and they say, well, you know, I already have an LLC like in place already. And with having that LLC in place, well, I haven't used it for anything, but can I just use it for this? So number one, would you say that should they do that or should they just create something completely separate again? And number two, are you able to get a NAICS code changed on a pre-existing business registration?
No, and I would just start all over.
Start the NAICS code all over?
Well, you don't choose the NAICS code. When you go to file your taxes, the individual who's asking you about your industry will be assigning the NAICS code to you. So that's how they know what your standard deductions are.
So specifically here in Georgia, I'm not sure how it works there, but specifically here in Georgia, we actually do choose the NAICS codes, and I've seen them on a couple of the other registrations as well. Now, are you saying that that's not necessarily the NAICS code that they're making you choose? You're just kind of like putting it there for now, and until you officially do taxes, that's when it locks in your NAICS code.
Yeah, that's when it locks it in. So that's why I'm saying no from like a high level, no. Okay. But like, for example, when I started contracting with the government, they made me choose a large array of NAICS codes. So I guess it's circumstantial, but for sure, you should definitely be structuring the business according to the code that you're going to be taxed on, the deductions that you should be eligible for, and the industry that you should be in. So if you're going to be assigned that NAICS code, don't change it or don't try to change it. Even if you've had a business that's been establishing credit over time, it's not the right industry.
And for clarification on my end, for those who, because even with my business as well, I filed taxes and I've gone through and selected my NAICS code. So I've selected the 721199. If they've already selected that because it's something that you typically do have to do when registering that business, is that just out the window once they do that, or is it still going to be attached that when they do taxes, it's just that at this point you've chosen the correct one and it doesn't have to be changed?
The second one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Shauna, did you have something? Because I know you asked that one specifically about NAICS, and I see you're off mute. All right, maybe not. All right. Okay, so that definitely makes sense.
All right, that was it. I'm sorry, I was trying to get off mute. I thought it was on mute. No, yeah, that was my question, because one of the things I don't think the NAICS code has been kind of mind-boggling me, because I don't remember, and I've already started my LLC, but if I recall correctly, I didn't have to choose a NAICS code. So when, we're going through this process and I was looking at the NAICS code and I'm like, I don't think I chose, I don't recall choosing that. So I'm trying to backtrack and go back through my things. But that makes, like, now that she said that, it was probably that I didn't actually choose an NAICS code. I think it does actually, like, industry wise. Like, I do remember having to choose something, whether it was like rental, investments, things like that. But I did not recall choosing an
even with that, with the industry as well, Nat, would that be real estate and rental with what we're doing, or would it be something in terms of like accommodation?
It's accommodations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So not still not choosing real estate and rental.
No.
So I'm sorry, another question. So is that, if you say, like, if your LLC is for, say, if it's Airbnb as well as invest, like rental or property investing, like investments, how would that?
So let me understand correctly. So you're using the business to also acquire investment properties?
Right.
And what are you doing with the investment properties?
Well, I haven't done anything with them yet, but in the long term, thinking about, whether it be like acquiring a property and flipping a house or something like that.
I would go ahead and do a different business.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you're acquiring the property under the business to go back into putting it into Airbnb.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that?
No, it's okay. Unless you are acquiring the property under the business's name, so that you can later do like the rental arbitrage with it too.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, moving into kind of more of like that business credit piece, which again you also attach to your industry.
Right.
How long would you say it really takes, based on you, and maybe for someone looking to get started within this industry as well? How long does it really take to build like I'm not even going to say strong, but a foundational business credit profile that would make you eligible for, again, that 80 paydex score, and then going on to apply to corporate leases? Now, I typically tell everyone 60 to 90 days. That's right about that beginning 3-month mark that we typically hear. But what would that be from your end of what you've seen in your experience with credit, just building a foundational score? I know you may not have specifically like assisted someone with getting started and moving into short-term rentals and corporate leasing, but just getting those up.
Well, I mean, I did it for myself. So you're right, I haven't helped other people, but if you already have a strong credit score and you don't mind making yourself the personal guarantor for any of these lines of credit or financing or whatever you're doing, then you can do it reasonably within 60 days, right? 3 months, even. Yeah, 60 days. You really could. 2 to 3 months.
And quicker than that too.
Yeah, and truthfully quicker than that, depending, like, for example, if you get a gas card and you use the like, let's say you use 10% of it, you pay it back, use 10% of it, you pay it back. You can use that as a leveraging position to say, this is my business credit score. It's called what's the word? It's called accounts payable turnover. So you say my accounts payable turnover is 7 days or it's 14 days, and they'll start pulling your information a little bit quicker than they would like 30, 60, 90, like for a regular net 30 account, right? So that's a leveraging position if you are willing to leverage your own credit. If you're not, right, it definitely can happen a little bit faster. But if you're not willing to, or if you don't have a strong credit score that can support that kind of financing, then you have to go through the tiers, which could take anywhere from like 60 to 120 days.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you say through the tiers, because we provide a resource within the mentorship program as well that kind of breaks down what those tiers look like, what vendors are included. Would you say that it's imperative to move through each tier in order to get to that point? Or because I feel like business credit, contrary to personal credit, it's so fickle and up in the air. Like I've seen people, like I just started my business 3 months ago and I got approved. I started it a year and a half ago and I didn't get approved. Like I feel like there's so many factors to it.
Right, though there are a lot of factors. So I'll just speak to maybe 2 or 3, right? So to answer your question, tier 1 and tier 2, you can kind of attack simultaneously. right? So like, let's say, what was it? Uline asked for 2 trade references. So if you get 2 trade references that are already, they don't even necessarily be reporting, you just have the account and you could reference the accounts numbers, then you can go ahead and do Uline, which is a tier 2, right? But a tier 3, I would definitely move through tier 2, 1 and 2 before you go to 3.
Exactly.
Because they're gonna be looking for sure. Yeah. And then
get greater as you move through each of the tiers.
right. They're gonna want more, they're gonna want more information, they're gonna want more data. And then to answer your second question, the discrepancies between like why someone might get approved or like what information they're asking for, depending on, sometimes if they pull your personal credit or they reference your personal credit, they might want to see revenue before they approve you for the line of credit or a trade reference sometimes. And then other times they might just determine that they don't want to take the risk.
With someone, because I didn't get denied so many times from Amex, it don't make no sense.
Yeah, but Amex has like a really tight matrix. Like their matrix is gold, right? So if you want an Amex, you have to have all your ducks in a row. Every last duck.
And it's crazy as well, because I've had Amex on like a personal level before, but with the businesses, and it's probably because with everything that I do and when I'm applying, I typically do not PG. So I started out at the beginning and PG'd what I needed to then, and then I stopped because I knew I didn't necessarily need it to continue building.
Right. Yeah, if you can do it.
So yes, Michael, you are more than welcome to ask a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm driving, so I couldn't type my question out. So I am one of the people that Precious was talking about. So I have an LLC, but it's a completely different industry. It's an e-commerce. And initially I was going to try to use that LLC, but based on this conversation, a little bit of research, it was clear that I need to start a new LLC. So my question, so therefore I'm going to be starting from scratch. I haven't even figured out the name, a name that I want for my new LLC. But my question is, I'm fine with using my personal credit. Like I have strong, all my personal stuff is really strong. So when you said a personal guarantor, does that mean that if I'm applying for an apartment, does that mean that the lease, like everything is in my name and there's nothing to do with the corporation until I get the LLC and my business credit and all that stuff established? Or is there any connection to the corporation if I'm using myself as that personal guarantor for the apartment?
Okay, so that's a good question. And I'm sorry if I mentioned it without elaborating a little bit more. So a personal guarantor, for example, is just saying that if I were to default on the business credit or the business card, that the business is not liable, the business and me are liable for the debt. Right? So that's what I mean. So if I go to apply for an American Express, I'll use Precious as an example. If I go to apply for American Express business card or rewards card, and they're saying my business credit is not strong enough, you need more revenue backing, you need more credit backing, then they're going to ask for my personal information to support the line of credit. That's what I mean by personal guarantor. But to answer your question, for an apartment, the great thing about Airbnb is that your business is tied to the addresses that you're listing, right? So even if an apartment complex has decided that they want to extend a lease to you, but they don't want to do a corporate lease because you don't have enough revenue or you don't have enough business credit to support having a corporate lease, you can personally guarantee the apartment. You can also still write off all of the standard deductions that would be associated with your NAICS code. So furniture, the rent, any supplies that you purchase, toilet paper, whatever the case may be, right? So whatever you purchase related to that business still counts because you're using it for business. It's a business purpose. As long as you don't live in the apartment, as long as you don't live in the home, you should be able to still, and the listing is clearly, like if you were to get audited, the listing is clearly what's making you the money. You can write off those things. So you are the personal, in that case, you're not the personal guarantor, you're the leasee.
Exactly. Yeah. The personal guarantor is like accompanying your business. Like, hell, I think that was like the piece is like a personal guarantor means that it's going to be you and the business, not just you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that, like you said, I would be the leasee and everything would be under my name as far as my dealings with the apartment owner. But when I'm doing my taxes and stuff like that, I can still like write off all the business expenses as long as they're clearly business expenses. I mean, as long as they're clearly expenses that are related to the business.
Absolutely.
And to clarify that, you were saying that that is the way, or you're able to write all of that off still. This is if you do not attach a business to it. Like you have a business, but it's not attached to the lease. This is not necessarily saying that if you go in and you ask, hey, can I do a corporate lease? And they say, well, yes, you can, but we need a PG. That's a separate like situation. And it's still attached to your business, Michael.
Right. Yeah. So, and it's still attached to you, just, and even to elaborate on that even further, because you don't want to get your mom on the lease and then now you're using all this for the business. It's not tied to you. The business is not tied to your mom. So you want to make sure like everything's tied to you. This is the listing that you're actually using for the Airbnb. Like everything is still in alignment.
Got it. Okay. So then I don't have to kind of like rush to try to get this, the corporation and do corporate leasing. I could just go the personal lease route, but then on the back end, just make sure that like everything is separated from personal versus business expenses and things like that.
Well, I think you still might want to do it. And I'm not saying to rush, but you still might want to do it because for two reasons. When Airbnb pays out, and I don't know how far into the process you've gotten, but when Airbnb pays out, they'll either pay you through your bank account or they'll pay you through PayPal, right? So if you have a business PayPal account, you can start showing that you have revenue through your PayPal account. So you want to have your PayPal business account to show that that's where the payments are going. And then just to make sure you're not conflating things, because that's called commingling. You don't want to commingle those things. When you have Airbnb deposited into your account, it should be going into a business bank account, not a personal bank account. So you want to go ahead and do the incorporation or file your LLC, whatever you choose to do, so that when those funds are being released, Airbnb is depositing it into the right place and you're not putting it into your personal accounts.
Got it. Okay. That makes so much sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And then I see your question in the chat, Shauna. You said, so as a new business, if you get approved for a tier 2 but for a low amount, is it smart to still utilize it or wait and reapply when you can get a higher credit line?
That's a good question. You could wait, just use it. Because honestly, like business credit is a little bit different than personal credit. Business credit works on a net 30 basis, right? So they want to see how much money you're going to use within a 30-day period. For the business score to be established, all they really want to see is that you're using it and paying it back. So you can use it one day and pay it back the next.
Yep.
No, if it's $2 or $200,000, they want to know, are you going to pay that $200,000 or $200,000 back within that net 30 window? So if they extend to you a smaller line of credit and you continue to pay within a short window, like if your accounts payable turnover window is short and your ratio is short, they'll keep extending credit to you and they'll go higher and higher and higher, especially if you have the revenue to support it. So you'll be fine. Don't worry about the limit too much.
Okay, so I'm sorry, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. So just to clarify and understand, go ahead and keep the lower limit and just start utilizing that, pay it back, and then just can like further down, just ask for a credit increase.
Yeah, and you can ask for it. In most cases, they'll just extend it. You won't even have to ask for it.
Okay, I know you were saying work through the tiers, and I was kind of surprised that they even gave me that. So I was like, well, maybe I should wait and not do anything with it. So thank you.
And that's why she said as well that with like tier 2, like tier 1 and 2 are almost, they can be done in tandem for the most part. So if you got approved for a tier 2 and you're like, well, wait, I didn't even get a tier 1 yet. It's pretty normal because they work in tandem.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we asked that. So would it be ideal to do the short-term rental model in an apartment that will allow you to, well, we actually just spoke about this, that will allow you to LLC and then be your own guarantor. Yes, we just spoke about that. So we are good there. And then we asked that question. Did we get all the questions
I'm looking right now.
now?
Hold on. Oh, the only thing we haven't discussed yet is why it's important to separate your business and personal expenses. We touched on it a little bit with, I don't remember your name, I'm sorry, but the previous young lady's question about starting like whether she should be in a rush or not to start her business. But okay, I'm gonna expose you a little bit, Precious. just a little bit for the sake of all that's good, I promise, all right?
Go ahead.
I've been digging into Precious for maybe the last 6 months about keeping personal and business funds separate. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say.
It's hard when you got so many businesses now.
it is. You're right, but it's going to be harder when the IRS slaps that hammer down. So, yeah, it's first of all, it's illegal. Let's just start with that, right? It's happened. I'm not coming for you. I've done it too. Like when I first started at Common Scare, it was a mistake. Yeah. You just don't want to get into that, because what happens is there's something called piercing the corporate veil, right? So if the government is looking at you as a business and they're separating the business and the personal, when you mix them, it pierces the veil that protects you from your personal assets being able to be accessed if someone were to sue you. So you don't want to do that, right? And then second of all, the disadvantage of doing that is if the IRS finds out, because they find out that you have been doing that, they can change your tax structure and end up taxing you more, which is not what we want, right? As business owners, we want to be able to get all the benefits of being a tax deducted or having that tax deduction status. So what might end up happening is if you have an LLC and you have a S corp, your Schedule C might be higher because now they're counting $30,000, $40,000 more of income, taxable income towards you. So you don't want that, right? And
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I was gonna say, because I remember when we were having this conversation as well, and I had asked, well, Nat, like, why are they checking little old me, and all of these big corporations are getting away with co-mingling funds, et cetera, et cetera. And can you just kind of provide the response you gave me of why the IRS is now more diligently checking these small businesses too?
Because everybody's trying to get away with it. That's really it.
EIDLs, the fraudulent ones.
Oh yeah. Everyone's trying, especially, you're right, especially through the pandemic, like everyone just started building these, not even really building, just kind of creating fake documents and like building businesses out of nowhere that didn't have the real history, that didn't really have the real revenue to support those kind of loans. And then we have to kind of pay for that. So it's really just, especially, and you guys are in a good position, especially with Precious to support, to do things the right way the first time, right? Just start off right. And if you do, when these things happen all the time, 2008, we saw it, we're now seeing it in 2020, 2021, when the PPP 2.0 rolls around again and you're structured properly, you'll be eligible for funding. You will be, they will literally throw the kitchen sink at you. So just do it right the first time, get all of your ducks in order, keep your funds separate, make sure your NAICS code is correct. And I know there's a lot of moving parts, which is why I said with Precious support, because you have that support. Tap into your resources and just do it right the first time. And even if, let's say it's not a PPP, when it comes time to be capitalized, especially if you use PayPal, if PayPal sees you doing consistent deposits, they will just start asking you, hey, do you need a loan? What do you need a loan for? How much do you need it for? And they'll give you the loan and they'll take the money back out of your future deposits. So like, this is just a good way to get started correctly the first time and then just soar from here. You guys are in a really great position.
So I'm open to open it up for a few more folks. We have Nat at least for a little bit longer. So if you have questions specifically about how you've been forming your business, where you are with your business credit, let us know, or come off mute, drop it in the chat and we can get those answered. But if not, that is pretty much all of the questions. And I think that was pretty holistic in terms of what covered. I think I saw you come off mute, Michael. Go ahead.
I did. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. So this question might not be relevant for this conversation. If so, we can, that's fine. But so like I said, I'm starting over with the LLC. So my current LLC, the name of my current LLC is Duval Land. And for my new LLC, I was thinking of calling it, like, so initially I was going to do a DBA under that LLC, but now I know that that's a horrible idea. So anyway, so for the new LLC, I wanted to call it like something like Devalin Realty or something like that. Is that, would that be too confusing for my new LLC to still have a portion of the name from my current LLC? Or, you know what I mean? Or should I just, to keep things clear, would you advise that I come up with a completely separate name and make sure that everything is completely separate in terms of, like, you know, how it's referred and stuff like that?
No, you should be fine. As long as it's not taken, I don't know how far you want to take it. If you want to trademark it, just make sure like you check the trademark office and it's not taken either. But on a state level, just make sure it's not taken and you should be fine. And as long as you can distinct like which bank account is which, you should be fine. There's no, the name really doesn't matter as much as like the contents and the context in which you're using the business.
And it usually helps as well when businesses are owned by the same person, right? Usually like the main problem is like you have a similar name to somebody else who is a completely separate person that you don't, because they can end up getting some of your documents, what have you, if anybody makes a mistake.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, great. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions from anyone else? If not, if y'all are like, I have no more questions for Nat, feel free to drop a thank you, drop something for Nat. I want to thank you personally as well, Nat. Honestly,
no problem.
You get my life together every single time with the finances. But I really appreciate you coming in and just providing your knowledge and your expertise to those who are within the mentorship program, because I think it's needed as well. It's easy for me to explain it, but it's different when someone who's field, this is specifically your field. Business is my field. Business and credit specifically is yours. So I know it's a lot better when you can hear from somebody who is in this line of business and they're an expert.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, really.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we got one more. Can you discuss setting up and tax structure for a business that you can have several other businesses under? So this is sounding like a holding company.
Yeah, that's all that is. Yep. Yeah. So if you so let's look at it like Amazon, right? Amazon is a really great example of a holding company because they've built this parent company, this big papa, and then under it is all these like little subsidiaries that contribute to what makes Amazon Amazon. So like Kindle, what else did Amazon acquire? They acquired Whole Foods. So now these are all the little companies that are under Amazon, and there are some benefits to doing that. It's especially if the businesses that are acquired under the company help build the parent company, right? But if they're unrelated, then it might cause a little bit of a problem if, again, you're sued. Because now let's say someone were to sue company subsidiary ABC, subsidiary 1, 2, 3, and every other subsidiary is now potentially open to that liability as well. So that's the upside, is to kind of have everything streamlined. You really only have to deal with one company. You have all of the revenue going to one company, but then it also opens you up to a little bit more liability.
And with setting that up, would it just be setting up, let's say, for instance, those who have LLCs? I feel like we typically say LLC because that's what everybody's most familiar with. However, whatever business formation or registration that you're setting up, is it just a matter of setting up that like how you regularly would for the holding company? And then at that point within your articles of organization, your business documents, you are actually referencing or stating, outlining that this is going to be a parent or holding company. And then I'm starting these other businesses, or will be acquiring these other businesses. Like, is that process just going through the Secretary of State website like we already did, or is that?
You know what? That's a really great question, and I'm gonna defer that to a CPA.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's complex, right? It's really complex,
and it likely varies state to state as well.
It's also very state to state. Yeah.
Is what you all were just saying in terms of the parent company, holding company, and stuff like that, and the liability, is that the same principle with an LLC and multiple DBAs under that LLC? So if someone sues one DBA, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's another option as well. And just for my knowledge, is something that I want to know. If that's the case, is there a real particular difference between someone who's like, okay, I'm going to start a parent company and have these other LLCs versus I'm going to have an LLC and have these other DBAs?
Well, I mean, it depends. So I have a couple DBAs, right? So Credit Conversion is the parent company.
Yep.
But Lumiere Group is a DBA. Corporate Conversion is a DBA, but they're all related to what I do. So it's fine, right? But if I were to go for the Airbnb, it's a whole different company. It's not a DBA under Credit Conversion, because I don't want there to be the possibility of having liability for the house. And then I'm now opening up myself to having Credit Conversion's assets sued or taken or seized or whatever the case may be. So I've kept it separate that way. But if there's related businesses that help support the parent business, do it. If you're okay with opening up yourself to that liability. Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions from anyone else or anyone in the group? Did that make sense, Michael?
It did, yes. This has been so helpful. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, of course.
I agree. It's been super helpful and I appreciate it. So thank you, Precious. And thank you, Natalie.
No problem.
Well, Nat, if they are interested in reaching out to you for more of your expertise, just following up, where can they reach out or where can they just find out more information about you?
Okay, so if you need more information, you are free to, and you know what, I'll leave it in the chat. You can send the info email to this email. That's .com, not common. Yeah.
Okay. info@mirgroups.com.
Yeah, so that's the business. So that could be working through your personal credit if you want to. I know Precious is helping you guys build your business credit, so I won't touch that realm. You guys defer to her for that.
Advance, they gotta go.
Sure. Sure. But okay, so here's the deal, right? If you guys are in the beginning stages where I know like Precious can still help you out, I'll defer to her. And then whenever you guys have like worked that out, then you can defer them back to me. I trust your judgment. So you'll know whenever they need to matriculate. So yeah, and then we also, the Lumiere Group solution also helps with being able to streamline your finances as well. So pretty holistic service.
And then I also, I will say that I think if Nat, I'm just now mentioning this, but I think we can bring Nat back, like maybe at the top of the year, talk more about once you all are, because at that point you're going to be about 60 to 90 days into building your business credit. So at that point we can really chat more about what is that going to look like in terms of, I know some folks have mentioned getting a car with my business credit, et cetera, et cetera. What does that look like later down the line? So
yeah, that's awesome. I don't mind.
Perfect. So again, thank you so much, Nat. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share.
Okay.
And then stop recording.
You have to tell me